ahead and call this work session to order on AO 2019-131, shortening the season for studded tires. Let's go ahead and do introductions.
Pete Peterson.
Mike Zalatoff.
Forrest Dunbar.
Susanna France.
Felix Rivera.
Bill Falsey, the English Municipal Manager.
Osama Abaza, UAE.
Sorry, what are you?
Osama Abaza from University of Alaska. College of Engineering.
Welcome. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Paulson.
All right, we're going to move the lights. This is a quick work session on this ordinance we've introduced, ordinance number 2019-131. As the chair said, which would shorten the season which vehicles may be parked on a street, highway, vehicular way or area, or any area within the municipality used for public parking, but equipped with a studded tire. I'll show you that in some ways this is an ordinance that is sort of a nice to have because we have a provision in law now, which is not the provision that we are changing, that generally governs the use of tires in the municipality, and it provides that nobody can have a tire with a protuberance, except you can have a tire that has studs, but that is limitable by the traffic engineer. So Stephanie Mormillo can set the time period in which you can have studded tires. Now, I suppose that we could just have whispered to Stephanie Mormillo, change the studded tire season, but we thought first that would be a little subterranean, and second, that we still do have a default period, which is instead codified here, where you have a provision about when you can park a vehicle with studded tires. So it's pretty straightforward. Right now our law says studded tires can't be parked on a municipal way between May 1st and September 15th. Proposal is to move the September 15th date to October 1st. But to clarify that there is an escape hatch, which is that the municipal engineer can change that period if the weather dictates it. We did have an earlier question from John Weddleton where he said, is snow cover the right hatch or should it be snow and ice? And he said actually probably snow and ice does make sense, so maybe we'll see a floor amendment or even a sort of 4 minutes from the business. This always had an escape hatch in that it referred to an earlier provision, which is referenced in the memorandum that allows the municipal traffic engineer to change the window. But we added this additional provision, first because it's easier to understand, and second because the reference thing says that you can limit the season. We want to make sure that the municipal engineer can expand the season. If we have a 10-day forecast that says we're going to get walloped on September 20th, then maybe you could say, okay, we're going to go early this year.
Well, and Juneau already has a shorter season for studded tires.
That's absolutely right, and we're going to get to that. So where did this all come from? I will confess, it came totally chance. I caught on Channel 11 that there was a report that had been commissioned by the State Department of Transportation, produced by University of Alaska Anchorage and Professor Abaza, that looked into the economic impacts of studded tire use in Alaska. And it's a very interesting report with lots of interesting things. We provided for it in full to you in the assembly packet. And Professor Abaza can tell you about the more interesting side. But we picked up kind of the easiest possible thing to do with the report. The punchline was, we all know, studs are extremely aggressive on dry pavement surfaces. There's an estimate for statewide damage caused by summer use of an additional $2 million. We in Alaska have the longest season for folks to drive, to have studded tires. So that's in the report. You can see the full table. We have the longest season of any state in the country, even other winter states. And even some other winter states have taken them offline altogether. So in Minnesota, you can't have studded tires. And there was a suggestion in the report with warming trends and decreased snowfall, it's recommended that we shorten the time period in which you could have studded tires. And a kind of reminder that we already have the policy rule that you can't use studded tires outside of winter time. So it's kind of an invitation. What is winter time anyway? So at that point, when we turned to our contacts at the National Weather Service, Louise Fode, who we got to know through the earthquake response, and reached out to her and said, what kind of data do you have about snow and ice conditions in Anchorage? And she said, well, we collect all that information at the Sand Lake Station, and here's what we got. The mean date for the last 15 years when we get more than a trace of snowfall is October 21st. And that doesn't always accumulate. The first date of accumulation is October 25th. And then at the end, the mean date of final snowfall is October 16th. And the mean date of final accumulation of more than an inch is April 18th. So we made the proposal to pick up the date to September 15th to October 1st. Why didn't we go all the way to this October 21st date? First, because we're only now sort of paying attention and still going to be collecting data in real time, but we're kind of being very precautionary. We're dipping our toe in the latest way possible. We thought we've got to build in some time for people to actually put their studded snow tires on if they really want them. And second, we do have people who live at elevation. So if the snow data is all at Sand Lake, I don't know how that correlates or doesn't correlate to what's going on in Bear Valley. But this seemed like a pretty easy first step to make. We didn't propose changing the springtime date for similar reasons. I don't yet know how the data about final 1-inch accumulation correlates to when the streets are actually clear. And there may well be parts of town that remain icy, but it's something for us to kind of put in the reminder box to watch this. If May 1st is not the right date anymore, we should pick it up and change that. Meanwhile, this is all about studded tires, and it doesn't affect non-studded tire use at all. So you put your non-studded winter tires on whenever you like and whenever is convenient. And I'm going to begin the pivot here. One of the things that was interesting to me about reading the report was that there's apparently quite a set of studies which are now showing that in an era of Blizzak tires, the traction that you get from studded tires is superior only in a really narrow window, only on clear ice at the freezing point. And if it's not clear ice or not at the freezing point, they're actually worse. And so folks are starting to observe already that the benefit, the perceived benefit from studded tires is pretty ephemeral or pretty minimal. And it seems like the market has figured that out. So they did a parking lot survey, and they found that now we're at about 35% studded tire use in 2018, which is down from 49 in 1990. I think an earlier statistics report somewhere like 78 in the 70s. But before I answer Mr. Weldon's question, which is I think going to be about the report, I'll say I interacted with Professor Abaza only to say that this was coming, but for most of the questions about the data, we haven't fully coordinated. He's got a presentation to tell you more about the interesting things. So,
Actually, back up one of your lines. Can I ask you a question?
Actually, I had Mr. Dunbar
Okay,
first,
that's
so
fine.
then I'll continue. Mr. Dunbar?
Yep.
Well, I don't know if this is going to be later in the presentation, but you mentioned people living at elevation, and
Yeah, go ahead.
so that is certainly one concern. But I think another concern for me is, and we got emails about this today that I don't know if it's said explicitly, but it wasn't for me. So it's not snowing in Anchorage right now, and it hasn't been, and that's our mean. But we get a lot of visitors from Fairbanks, and from people driving from Delta Junction and from Glen Allen. And there are a lot of places in the interior where there is snow. There has been snow for quite a while. So what do we do with those folks? We know we get a lot of people coming down the Parks Highway. Did they get to Anchorage and now they're subject to a ticket?
I think a couple ways to respond to that. First is, yes, there is a state statute, which has something that Peterson mentioned, divides between latitude 60 and up. Which means latitude 60, we have the default period that we have locally. Latitude 60 and down is a narrower window. This proposal really would create a differential. So if you're driving into town from Fairbanks and you park on the street, then yes, you could be ticketed.
I don't like that. I mean, I really think that is us. They need studded tires, and we get a ton of people, visitors from the interior. And that to me, without amendment, is enough for me to vote against this.
So,
Yeah, go ahead.
thank you. Is when a police officer writes a ticket for studs, would it be possible for him to go to his computer and check to see the residence of that person? I mean, obviously those tags, they have your residence. The DOT has got your residence. And if somebody's from Fairbanks and they don't write him a ticket, or
Through Chair, I know that it is possible to do an address search. I don't know. I haven't thought through the legalities of whether we could create a rule that said if you live north of a certain area and you are in Anchorage with studded tires, that is okay and not suitable. But I will say, as a possible comeback, the state statute does allow a person to apply to the commissioner of, I believe it's administration, to get a special individual traction permit or something, which allows you to put studded tires on at any time. So I suppose, if there were a person who felt like they had to have studded tires because they lived in clear ice at the freezing point earlier than everybody else did, and they had to be in Anchorage, there is a workaround. They can apply to get this permit, and if the state has permitted it, that would preempt any action on our side. My other reaction, I guess, is in some ways this would be very much the tail wagging the dog. The vast majority of people that are going to be affected by this law are local people, the vast majority of people are impacted on this.
And so it's just one more follow-up to that. So would it be possible for a person who got that ticket to go to the police station and show they were residents of Fairbanks and have it fixed or changed or taken off the record or something?
And with this proposal, no. Under a future proposal, maybe. And under a change in state law, it would all be potentially moot. Certainly anything could happen in state law.
Right. Okay.
Where's the dividing line in state law? 60?
60.
Where
It's
is that?
latitude 60. We're
Where's it?
63, right? So my understanding is I think it,
Oh.
I'd have to look at the map, but I suspect you have a southeast rule and everything else.
I got it.
Ms. Salazar?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you just tell me why this is a parking ordinance, not a driving ordinance? Because I'm sure that's going to come up.
Through Chair, I don't know. I think our law has mirrored a provision of state law, which is similarly phrased. I
Okay.
don't know the answer to that.
But the effect is
Yeah.
tires on your car. Okay. Yes.
Mr. Wendelson?
Your point on studs, really only working on that narrow band of icy, clear ice near freezing. That's about every intersection. So it might not be broadly around the city, but that's when you get cars warming it up, and it's right there at the freezing point, and that's when you need it the most. I don't use studs, do fine, but it's not just when you might go look at the streets in general. Any snow would do that.
Go ahead, Mr. Chairman.
Actually, no, never mind. Just-
Okay, well, my suggestion would be to pivot to Professor Rothman, who might have some actual science to respond with on some of those points.
Great.
Thank you guys for having me today. I think it's really interesting to see somebody really in the States raising the issue, because we worked on this one really hard, and I think we see a lot of solution that really might really help our community to save a lot of money on that issue. I just want to pinpoint my presentation is mainly on all the research we've done on this report, mainly from this one. And I'm going to give really more information to give you hints what would be other measures that could really be done as we move on. I just want to give you some really background, in northern regions, it's really popular, even Minnesota and other lower 48 states, they do use the studded tire. And that studded tire simply gives really more traction and help the driver have more control over the vehicle. In addition, it gives the driver sort of self-confidence when they do have the studs on. And this can really be either positive or negative, and I'm going to really tell later on why I had the question mark on this one and the other one, which is really addresses safety. Finally, it generally improves the performance of driving once you have the stud on. So it's really positive to have something that might really make the driver safe. Comparing ourselves with other states in the lower 48, you can really see we have the longest seasons after Montana of installing those tires. So maybe it's really about time to review our standards of having the studs on during the winter time. To give you a background, what we mean by studded tire. Everybody says studded tire, they don't know that we have two main types of studded tires. One what we call the heavy studs, and the other one is the light studs. Somebody's going to say, oh, who cares what's the difference? The difference, the hard studs are really extremely aggressive to our roadways compared to the light studs. The light studs are usually made of aluminum rather than steel. And if you want to get an idea what would be the difference in impact, the lights have almost 50% reduction in the impact on our roadways. So there is more to the issue other than just talking about studs, because if you look at the type of studs, we could really do more measures, as I want to really address later in the presentation. Now, what causes the rot? Everybody has that impression, oh, the rot is really caused by studs or what. There's so many reasons for the cause of this rot. We know passenger vehicles using the studs are really causing the rut, but also heavy axial wheels also cause part of the rut on our roadways. In addition, the higher the volume, the higher the extent of the rut, as well as the speed on the roadway. We've done very extensive study on freeways, on arterials, on collectors, on local roads, and the lower the speed, the less the impact on our roadway. So we have to look into that too, that the idea is not just studs, the speed is really an issue. As I said down here, the impact of the passenger vehicles per our study shows really this is the major rot are coming from the studs from passenger vehicles. It's not really coming from the heavy wheels on the truck. This is really crucial to know. Moving on, I just want to really put highlights on the problem. So when we look at the solution, we have to see, do we have really that size of a problem to really deep looking into the issues? As we outlined in the report, the reduction in the life of this structure is about we need rehabilitation 7 to 13 years compared to 15 years. Why I said 7 to 15, it depends on the class of road. If you're talking about a freeway, yeah, it's extremely extensive. Freeways, most of our freeways, you need rehabilitation after 7, 8, or 9 years, depending on the freeway. If you're talking about our collectors, that's the least. We might really lose 2 or 3 years of the life of the structure. So it depends on the class of road we're talking about. As Bill says earlier, we highlighted that we lose 47% of the life of the structure, comparing that the original design of the roadway is 15 years. And when I say 47%, I'm talking about main arterials and freeways. I'm not talking about collectors and other types of roadways or locals. Now, the state collects fees, collects taxes on the use of the studded tire. We've tried to see whether we're getting our money's worth from those taxes and to cover the cost of rehabilitation. Actually, we cover a very slight percentage of that. If you want to really get the number, we are collecting only 1 out of 42 of the taxes we collect, or simply the cost is 42 times the damage we get from the studded tire. So the tax is not really efficient to rehabilitate our roadways. The last thing but not least, we came with a number based on the planning level that on the state level we're paying about $13.7 million because that's really annually because of the stud. But that number has really a range between 13 to 15 million, but this is really on the planning level, that's what we got as a total damage per year. Of course, we have tons of technical information to support our claims, so I just gave you one slide from Glen Highway to show you, we really looked section by section on Glen Highway. How much is the rut, how much the traffic, and all the details. And you can really see this is the damage or the amount of rut coming from the trucks compared to the red line, which is coming from passenger cars. And you can really see passenger cars are really causing the majority of the rut out there. Of course, there's more technical information. If you want to spend the rest of the night with me, I could really give you more information about a lot of technical information, but this is just simply a touch of what I'm talking about. So the study was thorough, talking about good number of samples of the freeways, good number of samples of the arterials, collectors, and locals, and that's what we came up with.
I'm sorry, can you, I don't understand, what's the x-axis there, miles?
The green one is the overall total of the rut.
So what's the, you're going to read along at 0, 1, 2?
Those are the mile points on Glen Highway. You know that we have the controversy in mile and mile post, so we go with whatever theoretically documented in the DOT database. They document mile points. This is so the start of the Glen Highway, and that's the sample on Glen Highway, or a small sample of the Glen Highway.
So why would you have particularly those two sections, 1 to 2 and 8 to 9, so low?
Because each section depends on the volume of traffic on that section. For example, if you're driving on a section which is going out of Anchorage, you get a lot of traffic. As you go north, the traffic disseminates and you get less traffic. And it depends on the number of lanes on that section. Sometimes you get 4 or 5 lanes on the Glen Highway, sometimes you get 2 lanes. So it depends how much traffic you have out there.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Passing on, I just want to say, summarize in a very short one slide what we could really do about the studs. We have really aggressive measures we could really do, but we have really sort of a short-term measures which is really easy for us to go with. And it doesn't really require much of investment. It doesn't require that much of feedback from the public. The public, they won't really jump on us on doing those measures. This is really sort of technical. So I want to go with the first one, which Bill put, which we have in the report. We suggested to take 2 weeks from the beginning and at the end. And of course, Bill addressed some NOAA database. And I want to say the difference between the NOAA database and what actually going on the pavement. When we consider temperature, we don't really consider the temperature or the snow on the roadway. We consider the pavement temperature, not the ambient temperature. Meaning, if you look at the pavement temperature, it's really totally different from the ambient temperature. So if you're talking about October and you can really go into 15, 17, 25, or actually you can go further because the pavement temperature is still warm and we still have more leverage to do. When we estimated the 2 weeks before and after, we were extremely conservative. We didn't say, well, you can, simply we said those might really be safe. At the same time, I'm saying today, even with the 2 weeks, you need more of another study or simply a short study done by an expert in the field considering the pavement temperature, not the ambient temperature. And you're going to see that whatever we're talking about, the 2 weeks is really sort of a very conservative value. I come to the next one, which is, I thought this is really, yeah, go ahead.
Your recommendation to shrink it on 2 weeks was a statewide recommendation, not just state.
On the statewide, yeah, exactly. Remember, we said in this study, region by region differs. The DOT breaks the state into 3 regions, northern, south central, and the Juneau area. So each one has its norms, but we took samples from all. If you want to really be more specific, you want to go with more data about the weather condition in your region. In Alaska, in Anchorage and South Central, I think we are a little bit more flexible than the northern region. So we could really have more leverage on that timing. Even as I said, I recommended the 2 weeks before and after. I want to make sure for liability issues to have NOAA or somebody expert in the field to give us further data on the pavement temperature, not the ambient temperature. The second one, which is really, I thought this is really smart and we could really go with it, which what I call the flex time. Do you know what we do with the truck weights in Anchorage? We enforce the truck weights or limited 75% of the truck weights year by year. We don't really have a norm. For example, for that year, we say we're going to put a 75% reduction in truck weight over till maybe the end of June or whatever. Why we don't just adapt a flex time for the installation of the studded tire year by year, which we could really eliminate that bias in the variation of weather year by year. Meaning the Muni already got their bylaws about the truck weights, they might really have their sort of procedures to do the same thing for the studded tire. The third one, which is subsidize the non-studded winter tires. This requires nothing except the state or the city can really put more money into it. Believe me, whatever money you want to put, you're still saving. You're saving a lot of money in maintaining our roadways. Meaning, if you can really tell to the public, we're going to save you some money if you switch from the studded tire to the non-studded tire, and we're going to subsidize 10%, 15% of the Belzac or whatever the brand names are out there. This has to be coupled with public awareness. We want to make sure the public understand that the non-studded route almost have and sometimes has more advantage over the stud. When I say more advantage, I mean it, because if you're driving with a stud on a dry pavement, you're not getting that much of a traction compared to the other non-studded winter tires, meaning you still have the risk of getting into a crash because the tire is not really in full contact with the pavement. But the advantage bell-served area, which we have in our report, there is not much of risk. You're talking about 95% of the tractions you get on that one special case, which is icy conditions around the freezing temperature. So the chance of getting into a crash or the liability over this one is extremely slim. So the idea might take, we're going to take the initiative today and maybe go with that initiative, but other initiatives should really be started to consider the other options. I had this one, which I talked about earlier, transition from heavy studs to light studs. It doesn't take much, just public awareness, talk to the providers, guys, why you do just bring those light studs instead of the heavy studs? The difference in performance is exactly the same. It has been proven in studies, and we provided those studies in the report, so there is no difference in the performance. And we could really save 50% of that impact by using the light studs. The next one is really more attention should really be given to those who are really using the studs all year long. Do we have those guys? Yes, we have those. We've done an online survey with a lot of feedback from all states. There is about 5% of those who are using the studs, they keep the studs all year long out there. And believe me, the damage that comes from that during summertime under dry condition are way more than that of the winter time, because the pavements are relatively soft and you have those heavy studs hitting on the pavement. So the idea, let us do more public awareness and tell those who are really using the studs all year long, please consider that we are really exhausting our budget by whatever action you're doing. This has to be coupled also with enforcement. I'm not saying we want to penalize everybody. First, we want to tell everybody that this is really an issue, and then we have to tell our law enforcement to be careful about those who are using the studs all year. And this didn't came from us, it came from the online survey. Last but not least, I said we could really tell the DOT to improve the technology of mixed designs and so on. Honestly, they've done really a great job considering different bitumens, emulsions, hard rock aggregates. All these stuff are really improving, and we've proved that in another study that those techniques are really improving. But at the same time, it's way easier to jump to other forms of non-studs in that regard. Now, long-term ones, I know this is going to have a lot of public feedback and issues with the public banning, but for the first one, banning the heavy studs, the public won't really mind because they don't really notice. Simply, we could really talk to the provider. From now on, please we allow only lightweight studs. There is nothing from the public that might really create an issue. Yes, please.
Mr. Chair. Thank you. The heavy metal studs versus the lightweight studs, is there both a commercial and a private car equivalent? So if we have commercial vehicles that are using studs like larger trucks, is there a lightweight stud alternative for trucks?
It is available for all types of passenger vehicles, trucks, and all brand names. And we already got in touch with those who are really getting the tires to Alaska, and it's available for both. And I want to give you more info. The states imposes a tax on those who are using the heavy studs, just a very small tax. The the lightweight doesn't have a tax. People are not really aware of that.
And is the efficacy of the heavyweight versus lightweight stud also applicable to larger commercial vehicles as well?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
It's for all classes of vehicles.
And then I also had Mr. Dunbar.
Why do people use heavy studs at all? Does it cost more to
Because
install
that's
it?
the tradition we started with. When we started in the 60s using studs, we used the heavy studs, and most of those who were producing the tires till probably mid-90s, they're stuck with the heavy studs. you know, if I'm the manufacturer and I'm using the heavy studs,
Yeah.
and there's no bylaws to enforce me to use the light ones, it's not going to happen.
Do the shops around town that put studs into tires, do they have like, I don't know, is it a different kind of machine they need for lightweight studs, or can you load them into the same machine?
Exactly the same machine, but remember, most of the studs we get is really already in the tire before we get it to the state. Some of the shops here and actually in the Wasala area, they do install them. And I got one of the providers coming from the office who installed the light ones, and he said, I have no issues. The heavy and the light are the same cost to me. But people simply take a preference whether they need this or need the other one. So the idea there is no special arrangement for that one compared to the other.
Yeah, Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the heavyweight studs, are they also longer, or are both studs the same length?
We have different type of technology, but between those two, there is nothing different in the structure of one.
Thank you.
And actually, I'm not sure why this is jumped here. I just want to go all the way to mine. The issue, we have another really critical issue in the market, which we defined when we went and surveyed those who bring those studded tires. The state doesn't have a law how much of studs per tire, which means we have some tires coming from Sweden without really mentioning brand names. It has twice as much the studs on your typical studded tire, which we used to, which means it's going to cause double the damage on our roadways. So we need on the state level to have some kind of initiative to introduce the number of studs per square inch per tire, which is not really there yet. So we just discovered that by the last resort we're going to do, and I don't recommend that at all for this time. Over 5-10 years, we might really convince the public through public awareness and so on of the non-studded winter tires and come to a conclusion 10 years from now. Somebody's going to say, should we? Yeah, we should really think long term, because if the non-studs are really almost comparable to the studs in 95% of the time, why want to keep bring those studs in here? I know it's going to have a backlash from the public, but we have to prepare the public over a long period of time to come to that conclusion, whether it's really in Anchorage here or through the legislation. We have to work on this one now, so in the future we have planned for it. Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Peterson.
In the old days, before they invented studded tires, we used to put chains on all the time. And so has there been a study done about how much wear that chains would have on the roads?
There is two things to address for the chain. The chain can cause a lot of damage depending how you really install the chain on the vehicle. If it's really loose, it's flexible, it's not going to cause much. If it's really very tight on the wheel, it's going to cause a lot of damage. But at the same time, the chain might really have the driver lose control of the vehicle more than the studs. That's why everybody prefers to use the stud. And actually, I want to highlight another important issue, that all the costs we're talking about here, we didn't consider the cost of crashes as a result of the ruts. This study is totally different. Imagine how many crashes we have on Glen and whatever highway because of those ruts. Imagine yourself shifting from one lane to another lane on a freeway with those ruts. Definitely you're going to have a high risk of losing control. So that's why I suggested to the DOT, please let us create a correlation between the depth of the rut and the crashes here in the state. I've attended last year's the Transportation Research Board meeting in DC, and there is a study done in Virginia which proved beyond doubt that the deeper the rut, the higher the risk to get into a crash. For the safety of our community, it's not just the cost, the safety of our community, we should really consider doing such a study and simply try to avoid going into rut depth, or don't put a criteria for the rehabilitation for a rut depth beyond 0.5 inches. Yeah, the DOT has that criteria. If it comes to 2.5 inches require rehabilitation. Unfortunately, we've seen an inch and a half in some of the sections of our roadways, which is extremely dangerous. Finally, I just want to let you know there's a lot more information in this study, and there's a lot more projects we've done on safety on those issues. If you want to visit my e-portfolio, you're going to see a lot, and if you need me to send you any additional data, I'll be more than happy. But I always would say the safety of our community are really in our hand, and we can really do a lot. All what we need, ambitious initiatives of that sort to address the issue. I'm not saying we want to adopt it the next day, but we want to raise that issue with the public and with our agencies to do something about it. And thank you so much. I'll be happy, of course, to answer any of your questions.
Thank you. Ms. Allentown?
Thank you. Mr. Folsey, what's the Valley's studded tire rule right now, or what is it? Will it differ if we pass this? So the commuters coming in from the Valley, will they possibly have had permission there to put them on beforehand?
Right, so I'm not aware if there is a separate Valley code at all that addresses
Okay.
studded tires, but they would be subject to the state law. And 60 degrees latitude turns out to be just north of Homer. So everybody who just north of Homer is currently playing by the September 15th to May 1st rule. How many people are actually putting studded tires on May 16th? I don't know, because as the season gets further and further away, I think the big rush always happens after the first actual snowfall. So cinching it up to October 1st may just be one or two people who are way jumping the gun. I don't know.
I'll say that some of the feedback I've received is people put their studded tires on like they go get their pumpkin spice lattes based on date, not based on conditions.
Thank you. Mr. Dunbar?
I think Ms. LaFrancis had to be in the queue, then I'll go next.
Sure. Ms.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Dunbar. 2 weeks on one end doesn't seem like that much time. Do you have any ideas to what you would expect or how to quantify what could result from that? I mean, I know there are a lot of conditions, weather, and other factors, but would it really be significant, 2 weeks?
Yes, we said in the report that taking 2 weeks before and after the season is going to give us a saving between $2 to $3 million on the planning level. And again, this cost does not really include the cost of the crashes and the safety on those roadways. I do expect, looking at other studies in the lower 48, we might really get as much of that saving if we take into consideration the cost of the crashes.
And again, that's a statewide.
That's a statewide number, yes, thank you.
Okay. And then a follow-up, as far as the lightweight versus heavyweight studs go, do you know of any way outside of a ban to, and then I guess aside from education, to incent people to use them? I mean, I could see where it said, okay, the season for lightweight studs is longer than the season for heavyweight studs. I don't know if that would have an impact on behavior, but do you know of any other things that have been tried elsewhere to shift to lightweight studs?
No, we don't have any studies to give you really a clear answer on that one, but what we got from the experience in lower 48, the life of the heavy stud is almost the same as the life of the light stud. So I said, if I'm really concerned about my safety as a driver, it doesn't matter to me, this or the other one. If you don't mind, I want to go back to the question mark I have on the top. When you drive with a stud, you have that self-confidence, you have control over your vehicle. But at the same time, this is really dangerous. Why? If you have that confidence, and it's really icy or snowy, you think you can drive at like normal temperature. That's not the case. When short highway is really icy, we should really be, as driver, reduce our speed by 10 to 15 miles per hour based on the studies. If I have that confidence, I think, oh, I can drive like normal. And that's where we get our crashes. So the idea, yes, I got the self-confidence, but I'm using it in a different way, which might really put me in a crash.
It's always the beefy vehicles that are in the ditch.
You know, we have to trust our instincts. If we have ice or snow, we know this is not normal condition. We have to lower the speed. But unfortunately, if you have that confidence, you think you can do magic, but you can't.
Thank you. Mr. Dunbar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's also why we should narrow our lanes, right? People drive faster on wide lanes because they're overconfident. So interesting, the 60-second parallel. So I've asked Dean to write an amendment up that will allow, based on what Pete suggested, sort of an affirmative defense if you live above the 60-second parallel. And that is an interesting, I was just looking it up, it's almost exactly perfect where all the valley is captured because they're driving on our roads, their weather is almost exactly the same as ours, they should play by our rules. There's 30,000 of them coming in and paying no taxes every day. But Glenallen is just north of the 60-second parallel, and I think
There's no 60-second parallel.
What?
There's no 60-second parallel.
Is it not parallel? Is it 60-second? Latitude 62. All right. So going north of 60, it's not 60-second parallel. What the hell you call latitude numbers?
It's got to be parallel.
They're all parallel. Okay, anyway. So apparently Eugene is a flat earther. Who knew? North of 62, I do think the weather patterns are like Paxton. I know they've got a ton of snow recently. Fairbanks has had snow. It's 25 degrees there, and they've had quite a lot of snow recently. So that's going to be the dividing line for me.
About if you live in Hatcher Pass.
So someone else, Hatcher Pass. Yeah, I can't deal with that. Someone else suggested to me about I'm more concerned about people who live in Bear Valley or people who live at the higher levels. Is there snow up there? I haven't been up there.
I think there has been. It's probably not on the streets now.
Yeah, there was some of them. Mr. Weddleton?
Partly because you hear the conversations, what do we do about people who live in Mosilla and stuff like that? It really needs to be done at the state level. So have you tried and had any success, or
Again, sorry,
have you tried to get changes in the studded tire dates at the legislature?
No, we didn't try because that's beyond our jurisdiction. Simply, our client is the DOT. We give them the report. We gave them several recommendations where to go with the report, and we stated several policies for the legislation to adopt. And till then, I didn't hear from anybody except from you guys. I want to be honest. I'm so glad when Bill sent me that email. Oh, somebody's really concerned, and somebody want to follow up on our project. But honestly, I didn't see anybody following on that project. I failed to say that this project being supported by the DOT money and the Federal Highway Administration money. And that's why this project was approved to be presented to the next Transportation Research Board in DC in January. So we are talking about technical information being presented for our state on the national level. I hope we could really have more interest here than on the national level. Sorry for being frank, but
that's what we need, man. Don't be sorry.
If we don't do our business as Alaskans, nobody's going to do it for us.
When did you give the information to DOT?
I submitted the final report in May.
Okay, so they might just,
They're worried about their budget getting slashed.
well, that's that, but that's you can't introduce things that late in the session, so maybe they'll do it this coming year.
A question, and maybe it's for Pete, process with that. Can't at the state level they make administrative law changes? Like I thought there were three ways: executive, legislative, and through the bureaucracy. I don't know. That's a side issue. Yes.
That's a good point.
Mr. Peterson?
Well, I was just going to say you should contact your state legislator and tell them you'd like to make a presentation to the House or the Senate Transportation Committee and let them, talk it out. And maybe they'd come up with a 60-second parallel or a different one. In my experience, I actually bought some Hakkapeliitta tires, the ones you're talking about from Sweden, I believe. And my God, those were the best tires I ever drove. I changed them myself. I drove them for 10 winters, and they still had a little stud left. I'd probably still be using them if I hadn't have accidentally run into something and totaled the vehicle and had to buy a different one. But since I
He
don't,
personally did $1 million of road damage.
so since but I don't drive that many miles anymore since I'm not in the pizza business, and now I don't drive studs because I don't drive that many miles, and I try to, and most of my miles are in subdivisions where the speed limit is 20, and so if you're driving, slower speeds, it doesn't take you as long to stop. Anyway.
Answer to your question, I'll do my best to contact my representative. But again, I'm representing my institution and my research team, and I don't want to step on anybody's toes trying to promote something. I would love the DOT to start the initiative, and I'll be more than happy to volunteer to go anywhere and publicize that information.
So it's hard, just jumping in on this, it's hard for me to imagine that UAA doesn't do legislative lunch and learns.
Not to my
I think they need to do one this year.
Yeah. All right. Well, maybe you can take that up the UAA chain.
Well,
They
more
should.
tires.
Okay, any other questions? All right, I'll go ahead and close it. Thank you.
Thank you.